Hi there, I'm David from DB Chartered Accountants. From the 6th of April 2021, all large and medium-sized companies will have to make decisions about whether someone working for them through a personal service company is subject to IR35 or not. Where they believe that they are, then these, what we shall call large engagers, will have to put the earnings through PAYE, stopping tax and national insurance as if the worker were directly employed by the engager. This would be a disaster to the individual workers, as it would remove all their ability to use any sort of strategy aimed at minimising the tax that they suffered by the use of low salaries and dividends, for example. Before large engagers impose IR35 on a worker, they must issue them with a status determination statement, and in this state the reason why they are considered that IR35 should be applied. The worker has then the right to appeal against the statement if they think that this is wrong. And indeed, they must do this if they think it is wrong for any reason. The large engager must then respond to any appeal received within 45 days. Due to the fear of getting it wrong, many large engagers are likely to make blanket decisions about workers and decide that they are subject to IR35 without any detailed consideration or understanding of the particular circumstances that may exist, nor of the significance of the decision that they are making. This is the least risk option that many engagers are likely to opt for. Global and incorrect decisions are likely to be made by someone who is far removed from what is really happening and who have little knowledge of the tax implications. Consequently, if they get the decision wrong, and there are grounds for making an appeal against an adverse status determination, you really need to lodge one straight away. So, on what grounds can you appeal against a wrong decision? IR35 applies when there is a triangular relationship between the worker and the engager, with usually a personal service company in between, though the intermediary could be a partnership or even a sole trader. And there could be one or more agencies intervening in between the engager and the worker. If a triangular relationship exists, then IR35 applies in circumstances where the worker will be deemed to be an employee, should they be working directly with the engager rather than being treated as self-employed. Thus, there is a need to look at the factors that determine the status of the worker to consider whether or not the person would be an employee or self-employed. Before looking at these factors, you must bear in mind that it is not just one factor that is decisive and conclusive. All the factors of the working relationship must be considered in the round and the situation looked at as a whole. So, what are these factors that are important to considering status? First of all, there is control. If the worker is significantly controlled by the engager, then this is an indication of employment. However, where the worker is left to their own devices and there is no direct control, this would indicate self-employment. This is especially so where the worker is some kind of expert and knows more about the task that should be done than the engager's personnel. In such a situation, the control would exist with the worker and not the engager, and thus the worker could not be said to be under the control of the engager. Next is the concept of mutuality of obligation. This is where the worker expects to turn up on Monday morning and any other day and expect that there is work for them to do. Equally, the engager expects the worker to turn up and make themselves available to do what is required by the engager. If the worker has the right to pick and choose which jobs are undertaken, and there is evidence of such a choice being exercised, then it can be demonstrated that there is no mutuality of obligation that would add to the argument of them being employed. A truly self-employed person can pick and choose which jobs they take on, and would turn down the ones that it was unable to do, whether by choice or otherwise. Where mutuality of obligation does exist, then there would be little grounds for contesting employment status. Another important factor is the right to send a substitute. An employee can't send a substitute to do the work instead of themselves. Self-employed people can and do send employees or contractors to do the work on their behalf because they have a right to do so. In this regard, case law has clearly established that a mere right to a substitute that is never actioned and in reality would not be accepted by the engager just doesn't work. Thus, it's important that there has to be substitutes in the past and likely to be so in the future. Where substitution is a reality rather than a fiction, then it's a great indicator of self-employment rather than deemed employment. A self-employed person, like anyone in business on their own behalf, inevitably takes financial risk. They quote a price for a task and take the risk that such a price returns a profit to them. If they get it wrong, they will make a loss. If the work is not done correctly, they will be required to rectify it at their own cost. Such a risk an employee does not bear. Employees are often paid set rates of pay which are guaranteed, regardless of what work is done. They are not responsible for rectification at their own costs. If a worker does bear commercial risk, then this fact can be used as an argument to support being self-employed rather than employed. If you pay for insurance to cover what you do for the engager, then this gives support to the argument that you're self-employed. An employee is usually covered on the engager's public liability policy and not required to have insurance of their own. Thus, if you do have your own insurance, and particularly if you are required to have it by the engager, then you have an argument against being deemed an employee. Normally, having a number of different engagers is not too persuasive in the argument of status. You can have one engager that is large, which is caught by IR35, whilst at the same time having many smaller customers which are clearly on a self-employed basis. However, case law has established where an engagement is but one amongst many equal-sized engagements, then the situation indicates a self-employment position rather than an employment. A self-employed person may have to pay for materials and use their own equipment to do the work required by the engager. An employee would rarely personally incur material costs, and even if they do, they would get this reimbursed by their employer. Whilst they may possess and use small tools in their employment, they would not be expected to provide expensive items of kit and equipment for the work, as these would be provided by the employer. Working directly on the engager's own equipment at the engager's premises is more in line with employment. If the worker uses their own substantial resources, then it would indicate self-employment. So, how do you fight back against IR35? Firstly, forget the increasing number of schemes that claim they have the solution to IR35. Have nothing to do with them. HMRC have a track record of cheating against such schemes. Whether the schemes work or not, HMRC will claim that they don't, and you will face a barrage of brown envelopes to hike up the pressure and costs on you. They will also resort to untrue statements to diminish your resolve, and retroactive, if not retrospective legislation, which they mislead Parliament to pass to make sure that the goalposts move so that you are the loser. Clever schemes are a waste of time. HMRC will pour immense resources into making sure that they just don't work. To effectively win against IR35, it will be a really good idea to try and work with the engager to see if the situation can be improved so as to make this relationship tip more towards a self-employed scenario rather than an employed one. The courts have established that the starting point for considering someone's status should be the contract that exists between them. Thus, a good self-employed contract is needed, and this should tell the truth and represent the reality of the working engagement, with all the key factors present. It is also important that the worker knows and understands the terms of the contract and that both sides abide by them. Thus, when HMRC start asking questions about the contract, then no own goals are scored by saying the wrong thing. Needless to say, the contract should take into account all the key factors mentioned previously. Construe the relationship in the way needed to emphasise the status of self-employment. Some key pointers in this regard are as follows. Firstly, avoid guaranteed payments. Payments are better if they are a price for a given job. If the job is not done, then nothing gets paid. If the worker doesn't turn up, they don't get paid. The worker, as far as possible, should be expected to provide their own essential equipment and not use that of the engager. If possible, let the worker be the one to supply any materials that are needed, so these can be then included in their invoice. There should not be anything requiring exclusivity of service that prohibits the worker from working for anyone else. There should not be any automatic right or expectation of promotion or pay rises. Price increases should be negotiated at the end of each contract. There should also not be anything paid at times of sickness or holidays. Contract terms should be as short as possible and should come to an end and then be renegotiated, with no guarantee or expectation that they will inevitably be renewed. Where possible, avoid working core hours, for example 9 till 5 Mondays to Friday. Leave latitude for the worker to decide when and how the work required is done. Maybe this can be specified with a range of hours or even days. Avoid there being anything in the contract or the working practices that dictates how the worker should do a particular task or process. The worker should be free to do the job as they please, with as little possible in terms of direct control or intervention by the engager. There should not be any notice period, with either party being able to terminate the arrangement at any time. The appointment should stress the technical attributes of the worker as an independent specialist in their field. However, care needs to be taken to ensure that there is still a right to substitutability. Establish the right to provide a substitute and try to ensure that substitution actually takes place. You might, for example, consider having a retainer agreement with a person of similar skills to provide cover during illness and holidays, and this is included and permissible in the contract. Ensure rectification of any substandard work is at the expense of the worker, and they are required to make good any work that needs putting to rights. Ensure that there is a clause requiring the worker to take out their own insurance to provide cover for what they do. Avoid any form of uniform or other badging that would make a worker appear to be part of the employment team. The worker should provide their own workwear and avoid anything that involves falling in line with any corporate image. Certainly don't roll up in the engager's sign-written vehicle. The worker should be responsible for their own transport, which is not directly reimbursed by the engager, as would be the case with an employee. Avoid repetitive roll-on of contracts with the same engager year in and year out. It is in the worker's interest to seek and accept other sources of work elsewhere. The list could go on, but I'm sure you're getting the idea now of what's needed. The bottom line is that to defeat IR35, both workers and engagers need to take positive action to create a situation that is truly one of self-employment. Doing nothing and expecting HMRC to simply agree that IR35 does not exist is not a sensible option. I think there is a significant likelihood that some larger gaugers will get decisions on their status determination statements wrong. If they do, you need to use the arguments considered earlier in this video to appeal against the statement and hopefully get them to agree that you are not subject to IR35. If they do, they must provide you with confirmation of this. It pays you to challenge any incorrect status determination statements, should you feel that they are incorrect. Always consider them carefully and always make an appeal where you think they are wrong. However, working with the engager to create a truly self-employed scenario covered by a good contract is by far the best solution. Thank you for watching this video. If you need any help on IR35 or anything else, you can contact us on help@deb-accountants.co.uk or call us on 01 226 24 5824. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you get notified whenever we upload new videos to help you. Bye for now.